Hello and welcome to our webinar. I'm Fenton-O Creevy. I'm a Professor of Organisational Behaviour and Associate Dean here at the Open University Business School. I'm delighted to be hosting 4 distinguished academics from Lagos Business School in Nigeria, a school which, like us, is now accredited by the AACSB, which is one of the most important international accrediting bodies for business schools. Today we're going to be discussing the digital economy. And given the nature of our team today, I think we'll certainly touch on differences and similarities in digital issues for Africa and Europe. Am I allowed to imply the UK is part of Europe post the referendum? I'm going to anyway. We're also delighted to welcome audience members associated both with the OU and Lagos Business Schools, as well as possibly from other parts of the world. So our technical manager, Andrew, is going to start our poll just to get an idea of where you're all from. So please tell us which continent you're based in. So the possible answers here: Asia, Africa, Antarctica, Europe, North America, South America. I'm afraid, a little embarrassed to notice that we seem to have left off Australia. So if you're from Australia, please tell us in the chat box below. And looking at your responses, it looks like we've got about 15% of you from Africa, the large majority, about 78%, are from Europe. We've got a couple of people from North America and somebody from Asia. Maybe some of those numbers will go up as the webcast goes on. So let me, without any further ado, introduce you to our team for today. And we have, first of all, Yetunde Anibaba, who teaches analysis of business problems, decision-making, and people management on the MBA and the executive education programs at the Lagos Business School. She has a PhD in management, with her specializations being organizational behavior and human resource management. And that's what she teaches and does research in. We also have Dr. Obinna Muogboh, who teaches and conducts research in the areas of operations management and data analysis. He's also in the past served as the chief executive of GSMP Limited, a Nigerian-based manufacturing firm. Dr. Ogechi Adeola teaches marketing management at the Lagos Business School. She started her career at Citibank Nigeria in 1995 and spent about 14 years in that nation's financial sector, getting experience in strategy, product development, sales and marketing, and change management, amongst other things. And finally, we have Dr. Nubi Achebo, whose background is in instructional design and technology. And he's got expertise in learning design and solutions both for academic and corporate settings. And he's currently the Director for Instructional Design and Technology at the Lagos Business School. Before we turn to the first of our brief talks, I went ahead too quickly with the slide. Before we turn to the first of our brief talks, let me explain you'll be able to interact with us in this webinar in a number of ways. You'll see on your screen a chat panel, and we'd like to invite you to share your questions there. And we'll try and answer as many of those as we can. And just to remind you that the webinar will be recorded and available online after this session. So if you've got any colleagues who'd like to join in, you can share these links with them. We'll send you details of links to the recording as soon as possible after the event. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a series of brief talks from each of our panelists. Following each of those talks, I'll be asking them questions, some of them prompted by the things that you tell us in the chat box, but also after each of our panelists has finished talking to me, they'll be going to the chat box to engage with you directly through the chat box. So without any further ado, I'm going to move on to the first video.
Over the years, I've been fascinated by how humans, particularly business leaders and managers, process information to make decisions, whether with regards to business itself or the people that make up the business. It is reasonable to expect that an economically rational decision maker will make choices in the direction of their greatest good or in the greatest good of the company. But research suggests that this is not always true. And you will know that if you have ever made a decision and said to yourself, how could I have missed that? Various reasons have been given for these missteps and errors of judgment, including limitations in the ability of the decision maker to process information accurately, the availability or non-availability of such information, the limitation of time, and more recently, an array of cognitive biases, all of these one way or another related to information. With the rapid advancement of all things digital, it would seem that the matter of choice becomes even more precarious to the extent that the underlying element for any decision or choice situation is information. We now live in a world where information is at once abundant and elusive. Abundant to the extent that access to information about everything has grown with access to the internet. After all, the internet is not called the information superhighway for nothing. Elusive to the extent that there's now so much information that we can hardly process it by reason of the limitation of our mental capacity. So how exactly is this connected to the ability of the business leader to make sound choices or judgments? If we go back to my earlier mention of research and decision making, that suggests that even before the advent of the internet, managerial decisions were attended by various concerns, which were all somewhat connected to the ability to process information optimally, then it would seem that the situation can only become even more dire with the rate at which we now churn out information via digital means. The Did You Know Technology series, authored by a professor from IE Business School in Madrid, does a good job articulating the magnitude of the information that potentially confronts us daily. So enter big data analytics to the rescue. Defined simply as science of examining raw data with the intention of drawing conclusions from the data, incredible advances have been made in this regard, with sophisticated software available to sift through masses of data and summarize them better and faster than any human could ever hope to do. However, software don't make the decisions, people do. And while software can help to minimize the cognitive effort required to process the raw data, it does not eliminate weaknesses and limitations in the thinking process of the decision maker. It would seem to me, therefore, that perhaps one of the most important skills that managers and business leaders require in an increasingly complex world is the ability to think critically, simply put, the ability to reflectively evaluate information. This, I think, is the foundation of sound judgment, and it is often taken for granted until costly decision outcomes stare us in the face. Recently, the World Economic Forum listed judgment and decision making as one of the top 10 skills anyone will need by the year 2020. It is therefore relatively straightforward that organizations would and should prioritize the development of critical thinking skills for their leaders.
Yetunde, thank you for that. I have a first question for you. You made quite a lot there of the challenges of interpreting data. And indeed, OUBS research shows that while increasingly organizations are equipped to analyze large quantities of data, many managers actually struggle to use the data meaningfully. What kinds of skills do managers really need to make sense of big data? And do you have any interesting examples?
Okay, great. Thanks, Mark. Well, first of all, it's important to realize that data itself doesn't say anything unless you know what it is you're looking for. So first of all, managers and organizations need to know what it is they want to do with the data, right? But beyond knowing what you want to do with the data, finding the answers is a function of how well you're able to understand the data. In other words, like I said in the video, your critical thinking skills become absolutely necessary. Now, critical thinking skills speaks to your ability to reflectively consider information that comes to you. So there's no use having a bunch of data about everything without being able to understand or answer key questions that the organization needs to answer. And so to that extent, we're talking about the ability to understand the links between ideas or information. We're talking about the ability to determine what is important and relevant, right? We're talking about the ability to even recognize and appraise information as they come. And so critical thinking, obviously, is a suite of skills. It's not just one thing. And it suggests the ability to solve problems, it suggests the ability to analyze, it suggests analytical skills, right? So the ability to, put information out in the relevant spaces. It suggests the ability to be creative about your thinking, to be able to interpret the information, evaluate the information, to be able to reason through the information, right? So we find there's a lot of excitement now about data. And that's great, right? But to the extent that it's only as useful as what we do with it, then it's about time that we start putting some more emphasis on developing critical thinking skills of managers.
Thank you. So it's clear that we need different kinds of skills, but is it all about individuals, or is there a role there for bringing together teams of people? For example, I've been talking to people in the fintech industry a lot at the moment, and they find that a lot of the challenges they're facing need to bring together insights about consumer behavior, about data analysis, about financial issues, about business issues. Can one person do all of that?
No, certainly not, right? So first of all, the individual side of things is one thing, right? But I see a situation where organizations are going to have to work more and more in teams. Right, and by that we find that working in teams then suggests that we're looking at different skills or different knowledge bases, more like it. But that underlying skill, the underlying critical thinking skill, is still required for the different knowledge bases. So one thing is the knowledge base, the other thing is the thinking skill itself, right? So the teams will certainly have to consist of the different knowledge bases, but the ability to meaningfully query the different knowledge bases to get the kind of value we want is what we're talking about here. So certainly I see a situation where organizations are going to work a lot more in teams. That also has implications for the way people are managed, right? So for instance, reward systems would have to go beyond the individual reward systems, would have to go to team reward systems, would have to focus more on that, because we're looking at the opportunity to bounce off ideas on each other, right, and co-creation, as it were, of solutions, not just individual stars now. I think the idea of individual stardom, for instance, is going to diminish over time, most likely, right?
That leads very nicely into a question we have here from Samarendu in the chat box. The question is, data analytics are governed by rules, but decision-making is often intuitive, that is, not rule-based. How do we reconcile these? Should we reconcile these?
Well, again, so decision-making has two sides, right? There's the bit that is intuitive, but then there's the bit that is also quite rule-governed. Rule-governed to the extent that there are systematic processes, that you could use to make decisions. And so some research recently, around System 1 and System 2 thinking suggests that we need to start understanding how System 1 and System 2 thinking interrelates, right? System 1 is the realm of intuition, and System 2 is that more deliberative, more process-driven decision-making system. So I don't know if I completely agree that decision-making is entirely intuitive. It's a balance of the two that produces the best decisions.
Great. And another question here. We've got one of our participants, Steve Gordon, saying, reminding us that as human beings, we have bounded rationality. There are limits to our thinking. To what extent can computers help us with that, and to what extent do we just have a bigger version of the same problem?
So that's the thing. So what computers do for us, and I think that's exactly my point in the video, right? What computers can do for us is aggregate the information, or maybe even sort out the information and all that. But the ability to bring it together still remains the decision makers. The computers are not ever going to be able, well, don't let me say ever, never say never, right? But computers are hardly ever at least not now, be able to make the decisions for us. We still have to make sense of the data. We still have to bring the information together. What computers do, however, is help us aggregate the information faster, right? So they help us aggregate it faster. They help us see it quicker, hopefully, yeah? But in terms of actually coming to the decision itself, it's going to have to be, the skills of the decision maker, the ability to articulate or to make sense of the data that has been aggregated by computers. So in terms of time, speed, certainly, but the ultimate decision still rests with the person.
Great, thanks very much. And it's now time for us to hear from Dr. Obinna Muogboh.
The new digital economy is beyond internet connectivity. It is the convergence of broadband, cloud computing, mobile connectivity, social media, business intelligence, and the Internet of Things. These technologies are allowing us to introduce new innovations into the mainstream of well-established business transactions. The new digital economy brings in disruptive innovation into the competitive landscape. You either join in to stay ahead of the pack or be left behind. The new digital economy has revolutionized the way we view and manage information. It provides opportunities for innovative ideas to be implemented without the burden of investments in costly physical assets. The new digital economy has helped businesses to reduce costs, extend market reach, develop new products, and compete more effectively. However, it is important to also point out that the new digital economy is also leveling the playing field and allowing low-cost competition from unlikely sources in terms of both geographical locations and industries. Previous boundaries between industries are being blurred by the new digital economy. Good examples include Uber, Airbnb, YouTube, iTunes, Google Scholars, and many more mobile-based apps. While new digital technology is disrupting market dynamics, it also holds the solution for firms that need to operate at a very high level of efficiency, speed, and innovation. The new digital economy will lead to improved supply chain performance if properly deployed. For digital technology to create significant improvement in supply chain outcomes, businesses need to reinvent their supply chain strategy. They need to reimagine supply chain as a digital supply network that unites not just physical flow, but also knowledge, information, and finance. Deploying technologies in supply chain management provides businesses with opportunities to reach new customers, reduce costs, reduce lead times, improve employee productivity, and improve supply chain management. A lot of examples abound on how the convergence of the new digital technologies have improved supply chain operations and in some cases changed traditional business models. For example, the new digital economy has completely changed the working models in music, publishing, and filmmaking. Movies and television shows can stream on demand to any digital device, and the news, books, and other publications are moving to mobile phones and tablets. For instance, Amazon.com announced recently that it now sells more ebooks than hardcover and paperback books combined. Many companies now rely on business intelligence and analytics to help manage inventory and make sure that products are distributed to the right locations based on consumer preferences. The first challenge is the issue of cybersecurity. According to a recent study by Oxford Economics, the digital economy has escalated the threat of breaches in cybersecurity, misuse of intellectual property, and reputational damage from open communication on the web. Consideration of cybersecurity is no longer something that could be relegated to the background. This consideration would increasingly be a major factor in selecting and maintaining supply chain relationships. The increasing number of mobile devices and Internet of Things creates risks around the protection of sensitive information such as customer data or intellectual property. Business intelligence carries with it the risk of making decisions based on inaccurate or irrelevant data. The intelligence of such systems is as good as that used to build it. It is now certain that the new digital economy is here to stay. It will continue to have significant implications for organizations in the future. The priorities of corporate leaders in this new digital economy should be to develop a forward-looking mobile strategy in a globalized world where mobile is the primary means of internet access. They also need to be ready to leverage on the new digital economy to innovate new products, develop new markets, and improve business processes. They also need to improve data analytics and business intelligence to improve both the quality and speed of decisions along the supply chain. In addition, they need to address the security threats posed by the new digital economy by building stronger safeguards into their operations and supply chain. Finally, they need to be ready to compete with non-traditional competitors, including new entrants from different geographical locations and industries.
Thank you, Obinna. And I'd like to ask you the first question. So you talked a little bit about the issue of cybersecurity there, and of course this is to do with the growth of cybercrime. And many police forces around the world struggle to catch up with cybercrime. We know this to some extent from OUBES's own policing centre where we're doing research with police forces around the UK, and this is an issue they talk about a great deal. What can firms be doing to tackle cybercrime, and is this a special problem in Nigeria?
Thank you, Mark. This is a very important issue. I think in the last couple of years, we have seen a lot of high-profile cyber attacks and breaches, like the recent hacking of the Democratic National Committee systems during the U.S. elections and the recent Tesco Bank breaches. Indeed, even a recent survey by PwC portrayed cyber security as a major issue. Over 90% of large organizations and 74% of small businesses surveyed in UK experienced some form of a cyber breach in 2005. Cybercrime is a global problem and would require truly global cooperation to address. However, recent events seem to indicate that countries also view cyberspace as a new landscape for dominance. This makes it a little bit difficult to adopt a truly collaborative global approach in this fight. In the meantime, I think organizations must protect themselves and minimize exposure to these new digital threats. Organizations must be ready for this by designing a strategy for detecting, responding to, and recovering from cyber attacks. Organizations can manage these security threats by taking certain steps. First, it takes leadership and foresight to protect business from cyber attacks. Cybersecurity must be elevated to a C-suite agenda through the CIO or through the appointment of Chief Security Officer. Second, I think organizations must engage competent IT security experts to help them understand their key vulnerabilities and nature of cyber threats facing them. Third, I think they need to put measures in place to manage the cyber threats and prevent security breaches. there are arrays of measures that could be deployed. But ultimately, the nature of organization's business will determine the specifics. But there are certain basics anyway.
Great.
I think
a couple of other questions from our chat box.
Okay.
Terry asks, given the ever closer relationships implied by digital supply chains between customers and suppliers, could you say something about the role of trust there needs to be between human beings in the digital supply chain?
Yes, indeed. I think the important thing about convergence of the digital technologies is that it offers a unique advantage in that it allows for information visibility along the supply chain. So hence, with a lot of information flowing freely and available to the players and organizations along the supply chain, so you have more open interactions, and it helps to engender good relationship and trust. So I think it's good.
Does that also mean that there are anxieties there for firms about the potential leaking of information they prefer to keep secure and out of the competitive landscape?
Yes, certainly. This is also a threat, a security threat, and organizations have to evaluate the relationships, their supply chain relationships against some of these threats, because it is a real threat in the supply chain. So people have to work with people they can trust and be able to collaborate. Of course, they have to take legal action, sign the necessary documents, but it's also a threat that needs to be managed, and it has to be taken into consideration in assessing supply chain relationship.
Okay, great. There's a really interesting question here from Andrew Hatton. He notes that last week it was announced that vinyl album sales had now overtaken sales of digital downloads. And vinyl, of course, was something that people thought was dead or a narrow niche, and yet he suggests that the real dead end was digital downloads, streaming being the winner, at least at the moment. So his question is, how do you navigate this area when things are changing so fast and the things that we're betting on suddenly turn out to be a bit of a dead end?
Please, Mark, can you take that again, please?
Yeah, so the point here, Andrew, seems to be making is that with the news that vinyl, hard copy records, very old-fashioned technology, have now recently overtaken in the UK sales of digital downloads of music. And so the point he's making about this is that quite often the trends that we think we see happening can turn out to be a dead end. For example, it seems to be more about streaming rather than digital downloads at the moment. And so how do firms navigate this area in the face of such speed when they're trying to construct systems to deliver against the trends that they see happening?
One good advantage of digital innovation is that it offers you quick response to innovations. And certainly in doing that, one has to be careful and evaluate the target audience. I don't think we just innovate for the sake of innovation and access to technology. We should innovate bearing in market that the fundamentals of business still remains the same. In other words, we must be able to deliver value to our customers, be it through the digital technologies or the old system. So that's fundamental. We must always remember that the customer is still there and is the king.
Great. Thank you very much. And it's now time for us to move forward and hear from Ogechi.
Digital economy is actually an economy predominantly based on digital computing technologies. And this is actually premised on the internet, which has become ubiquitous. In Africa, where I come from, and particularly in Nigeria, the internet penetration is estimated to be 46.1% of the population. And with a population of 180 million people, the implication is that we have 86 million people online and 100 million non-users. And out of these 86 million people, it's also estimated that 75% of the internet users are millennials, and this has implications for businesses. Businesses would have to think and decide who are the consumers, the target consumers. What do they want? What do they buy? Where do they buy? How do they buy? When do they buy? And this also has implications for product decisions. What kind of products do they want? In marketing, we speak about the marketing myths, the P's of marketing. So the product decisions, fundamentals still remain the same. Businesses will have to think what products would its new target market want, at what price. The pricing decision is also key. You have to think of promotion. How are you going to communicate? Are they online? If they are online, you have to think of effective communication online. And if they are not online, what communication do you have to utilize to pass your message? And we also have to think of place decision, the P of place, distribution. Would you sell online? Would you reach them online? These are key. And in everything, fundamentally, we know that customers do not buy products, they buy benefits. So these benefits in this digital economy will need to be conveyed. It needs to be communicated. It's so important to know that according to John Chambers, the executive chairman of Cisco, he said Internet of Everything has changed everything, disruptive technology. The landscape has become disrupted. And do we have a choice whether we should do social media or whether we should embark on social media? We have Eric Quellman telling us that we do not have a choice whether to do social media. The question is, how well do we do it? How well should businesses compete in this ever-changing landscape? Every business has to think of how do we increase what we call TOMA, top of mind awareness? Because once you increase TOMA, you would have an improved share of the wallet, SOW. And in the digital age, its segmentation is very important. Broadly, segmentation, you have digital natives, digital immigrants, and a category called digital monks. Digital native people born after the advent of digital technology, typically 1980 and after that. We have digital immigrants, those born before the advent of digital technology. So we have those born before 1980. Then we have a category that you cannot really place. They know that technology is changing, but they might never embrace it. So we call them digital monks. I also like the American categorization where you have the Gen X, the baby boomers, and the veteran being categorized as digital immigrants. They need a visa to the digital age, to the digital world. Then we have the digital natives born after 1980, and that would actually be the Gen Y and the Gen Zs. Personally, I classify myself not really falling between digital immigrants where I am. I call myself Gen C, where digital content, we create content, we develop content, we distribute content. So you have to understand what category would you give your customers, and this would have implication on how you play the game, because you need to play the game. Do you have a choice? No, you don't have a choice.
Ogechi, thank you very much for that. You talked about the increasing levels of digital participation in Nigeria. My first question is, does this work the same as in Europe? Are there differences in the way in which digital participation is working? And what sort of implications does that have for how firms should understand and segment customers in Africa in the digital space?
Thank you, Mark. Let's compare Nigeria and I'll use United Kingdom. As I had mentioned earlier, Nigeria population 180, 186, but I'll use 186 million, which is the figure used by Internet Life Stats. With a penetration rate of 46.1%, we have 86 million people estimated to be users. In the UK, Internet Life Stats estimates a penetration rate of 96.2% of the total population of about 65 million, which gives a population of users of about 60 million and a non-user population of 4 million internet-less. So there's a wide difference between the two countries. We have 46.1% Nigeria and 96.2% in the UK. What accounts for these differences? We'll say higher level of infrastructural development and greater access to internet in the developed economy as against the developing economy. And for mobile, let's also compare mobile usage in both countries. Starting with Nigeria, we have a recent research showing Nigerians spend more time on the mobile device than any other device, with mobile device usage peaking at night between 8 p.m. and 12 p.m. That's from Terragon, a digital media company. And there's also estimated that 76% of internet traffic in Nigeria came through the mobile phone. In the UK, we have the Office of National Statistics giving us that and telling us that mobile or smartphones are the most popular devices used by adults to access the internet. So there's a convergence here. We agree that mobile is the most important access to the internet in both countries. But the difference we have is the demography of the users. In Nigeria, our users are millennials, people between 18 and 36, which form the bulk, and it's estimated 70% of Nigerian online participants are under the age of 35. In the UK, from statistics, it cuts across social networking spread in all age groups, up to and also including those that are aged 55 to 64. So that's the disparity between Nigeria. But however, and between Nigeria and the UK. But for both countries, the bottom line is the fundamentals still remain the same. You have to segment your market. You have to understand your target market. You must have real consumer insight. And to the second part of your question, what do we do for Nigeria? We need, because of the infrastructural problems, we need to have a mobile strategy, a strategy for winning in this digital age. So that means for us, you must have content that are mobile, that can use mobile phones well, adopt a mobile first strategy. So all websites should be optimized for mobile usage with less emphasis on desktop. For advertisers, since most of their adverts should go to mobile and not, well, it depends, but mainly mobile and less emphasis, depending on the product, on TV, print, or desktop. Then we can use less graphics and include dynamic elements in the website, so loading will be faster for my country. But for both countries, we should understand the power of the newly empowered consumer and what the impact would be on your business.
So that's great. And you mentioned infrastructural issues. I've just noticed in our chat box a couple of our participants have been talking about that point. For example, that in economies where there isn't always a guarantee of power supply, does that mean, for example, that you need to deliver content in ways that mean people can still access it when they're offline?
Yes, you should. I believe that in countries that have similar situation, or in similar countries that are in emerging developing countries, we should adopt a mobile first strategy. You should optimize your content, optimize your website for mobile usage. So that means you're not going to think of heavy content, and also we should have content that will be easy to be downloaded, and that ease of usage is very important. So you should make sure that whatever you're doing have a mobile first strategy. for countries, and the mobile first strategy, having in mind the level of infrastructure, the type of the usage of the phone, the time of usage, and what people do on phone. So web analytics can give you that information. It can give you that information that would help you develop a good strategy for mobile usage in Nigeria, in Africa.
Thank you. So another question here from Joe in the chat box. Joe asks, hardware devices are the gateway to the benefits of the digital economy, but how do you think the balance will shift between the importance of hardware and software products by, say, 2020?
Just can you repeat the question?
Yeah. So Joe asks, hardware devices he sees as the gateway to the benefits of the digital economy, so phones, computers, and so on. But how will the balance between the importance of hardware and software develop by the year 2020? I wonder if maybe we might look a bit further out as well, because 2020 is starting to seem quite soon.
In 2020, I believe that there would be increased usage. It depends on the country, but I think that mobile device usage will still be very important. It would really escalate in 2020. We are in 2016. In the next 4 years, the important we need to ask, any company should ask, or any individual, anybody involved in mobile strategy should ask those fundamental questions. First of all, you ask, where are we now? And you ask, and that will take situation analysis. Then you ask, where are we going to? Where do we want to be? Well, what do you think the future will look in 2020? And that will involve a lot of analysis. You have to think about how would hardware evolve, what would evolve. But it needs strategic thinking. And then you have to think about how do we get there? How do we get to achieve that strategy? And you ask yourself, when do we get there? 2020. What will change in 2020 in technology? And a lot will change, not only in mobile mobile telephony or technology. A lot will change in the different economies, and how would it impact on your business?
Great, thank you very much. A lot to think about there, and it's time to move on to hear from Dr. Nubi Achebo.
Companies are currently going through digital transformation as a first step towards tapping into the digital economy. This step requires leadership to buy in, to play in the digital economy landscape. This involves leadership acceptance and incorporation of strategy into the operational strategies of an organization. Once this is accepted, what happens to the organization depends on the leadership of the organization. While the digital economy is about application of digital technologies to business, it is important to acknowledge that humans are largely pivotal in the success or failure of the businesses engaged in the digital economy. Employees at various levels in the organization have to accept the vision of the leader and skill up. The human capital development process is usually championed by the human resources department. Organizations do not transform overnight. An organizational digital strategy is critical to embark on the transformation for a company. It took Apple about 5 years to transform the music industry. Airbnb and Uber took 2 years to change the hospitality and the transportation business. As part of the transformation effort and a move to the digital economy, learning and development units in the organization are required to look at the competencies, identifying existing gaps, and providing solutions to close the gaps. So what are some of the required competencies employees need in the digital economy? There are several challenges. One that I can think about is technology obsolescence. Because the digital economy relies on technology, we have a situation where some skills that are acquired by individuals get obsolete so fast. For example, in the past you used to have a requirement for people with HTML skills, PHP, Flash. These have become obsolete. Now, employers are looking for people with skills in programming languages like Ruby or Python, because this is the new skill. So the technology is changing very fast, and organizations need to be agile, in terms of meeting up with this, change that you have. And also, there are a lot of individuals who are needing to be trained. And because of the sheer numbers that you have, it's very difficult for organizations to get through to training these individuals, despite the fact that you have multiple outlets to do such training. Even though online learning is relatively cheap, I would say, they are relatively priced in such a way that they are affordable, but still, it's a big issue, affording some of these courses. And as such, even though the courses are available, access to these courses is very difficult, because of the price of the courses. And also, organizations, because of the downturn in the economy, Nigeria has been experiencing a recession, for example, and as such, companies are cutting down training budgets. And if you're cutting down training budgets, that means there is that technology skill that somebody needs to acquire that they're not getting, because the amount of money allocated for training in the organization is not enough to go around. So these are some of the challenges that organizations are facing. One, you have a lot of people to be trained, and they can't be trained fast enough. You have technology that's going out of fashion very fast, and so you have to train new personnel to cover those areas. And also, even though we have online courses available, they are still relatively pricey, for people in in Nigeria. Because if you look at the currency exchange right now, our currency has taken a huge hit in the past 12 months. And as such, even though a course relatively priced at $46, for example, is a huge expense, for somebody who's wanting to take the course in Nigeria, or for an organization to pay for such a course in Nigeria.
I apologize to everybody. I was on mute.
Okay.
I'm going to ask my question again. So Nubi, you've talked about the challenges of staff development. What role should business schools play here? Do we have the right kind of courses to support firms in developing their employees in the digital age? And what are the challenges for us as schools?
Thanks, Mark. Business schools should be in the forefront of making a difference in making sure that organizations are successful in transitioning into a digital economy. For the most part, the current business school model is focused on teaching concepts in the functional areas of business, such as finance, strategy, operations, accounting, and human resources, among others. But unfortunately, the new digital economy requires more in terms of knowledge and skills. In this digital age, companies are looking for employees with good business sense, technology savvy, and people who can work collaboratively with others to create value. So what should business schools do? First, business schools need to transform themselves into digital organizations as a model for organizations. This will provide proof of authenticity and credibility while pushing the digital concept to organizations. Second, business schools should recast their curricula to reflect digital concepts to empower graduates in order to help organizations formulate and execute effective digital strategies. Third, business schools should research and help organizations come up with effective digital economy models that will create value for stakeholders. Now, do we have the right courses to support organizations transitioning into a digital economy? Maybe not. Maybe yes. It depends on who you ask, It depends on what institution you're talking to. Digital has been a huge economic driver with huge growth comes a need for personnel with digital skills and acumen to lead companies into the digital era. Companies have been making the transition to the digital economy in the past few decades, and they need digital leadership. So business schools need to focus on digital leadership skills. Leadership is key for the success of transformation to a digital platform. Digital leadership is required to drive the business model innovation afforded by digital technologies, such as social media, mobility, analytics, cloud computing, and Internet of Things. Digital leaders are those who have the business, technology, and personal competencies to exploit their digital ecosystems through a well-crafted vision. And also, big data and analytics are two relevant areas because of the huge data organizations generate and the need to mine such data for insights that will be beneficial to functional units.
You make a really interesting point there about the importance of data analytics skills. Does that mean that business schools need to be working much more closely with academics and experts in the fields of IT, of data analysis, and so on?
Indeed, I think business schools should be in the business of partnering with large companies with expertise in data analytics and big data in order to provide the right and requisite background for the graduates, because we are expecting and relying on some of these business graduates to go into organizations and actually become part of the workforce that will champion and lead companies into a digital era. So it is crucial to have that kind of partnership, because it's through that partnership you have the business knowledge, and then you have organizations that have the knowledge in terms of digital skills to do that. And also, I think business schools should be looking at students with different backgrounds. It has been traditional that many students coming into the business school have a background in, say, business or all these other areas. But I think it's time, that business schools start targeting students with STEM background, that is science, technology, engineering, and math, into the program, because in most cases you have business schools that are kind of independent, in the sense that you don't have a whole school system around the business school. In situations where you have a school system around the business school, it's easy for the business faculty of business or the business school to partner with other departments on campus and have a kind of synergy, to move directly into the digital age. But when you have business schools who are standalones, then there is the need for such schools to attract, like I said, students with STEM background, because they are already familiar with technology. This will help, in terms of creating a body of graduates that will go out into organizations and be able to help organizations make that transition to the digital economy.
Thanks very much. And time's moving on, so I'm going to move on to, we're going to have a final poll, and while you're completing that final poll, I'm going to be asking our panel to make some last comments. And I'm going to ask them especially to address this issue of what are some of the differences we're seeing about the way in which the digital landscape is evolving in Europe and in Africa. So, Andrew, could you put up the final poll for us, please? We're going to be asking you what aspects of the digital economy does your organization or your own business find most challenging? The first is developing people. The second, making sense of data. The third, understanding your customers. The fourth, issues in your supply chain. The fifth, keeping pace with technological change. And finally, a catch-all other category. But if you're answering other, perhaps you'd like to tell us what that other issue is in the chat box below. Okay, so I'm going to move on and ask each of our panelists in turn for some final comments about this question on some of the differences in the evolution of the digital landscape between these different parts of the world. Yetunde.
Okay, Mark. Well, I'm not sure that the differences are quite drastic. However, I think that in each environment, organizations are responding to their context. So, for example, the Guaranty Trust Bank, one of the big banks in Nigeria, has recently launched a virtual prepaid card, the MasterCard. And I think that was driven primarily by the need to ensure security, right, on transactions. And so you don't need to, the details of your cards don't need to be exposed. Right? And you could just know just what you need on the virtual cards, and So I think that in each environment, the evolution of digital is would simply be in response to the needs in those markets. Of course, we also know that in our context, for example, there's serious infrastructural deficits, right? So that limits the extent to which we can evolve. However, there are just incredible things coming up now. The big newspaper in Nigeria, for example, has launched online TV and several other groups like that. And what is also happening is that this also actually helps to check the infrastructural challenges, because now you probably don't have to travel on roads that are, jam-packed because of traffic to get certain things done, right? So bottom line is that I think the evolution will be driven by the needs in each environment. I hardly think that it's going to be one large sweep, across different contexts.
Okay, great. Thank you. Obinna, your final thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. I think the digital economy has impacted the developing countries in a unique way. The first thing to note, in a country like Nigeria, for example, you find that major access to internet is, of course, through the mobile. So many firms and organizations have adopted strategies that will target mobile access to the internet. For example, you find that the banking sector and the retail sector have designed products that target these sectors. And one other challenge, of course, from a developing country context, is people are increasingly beginning to use digital technologies to overcome some of traditional challenges in these countries. The first one is something like a challenge of infrastructure. So people are becoming innovative and trying to find out. But the bottom line is this. I think that if properly deployed, digital technologies could help companies improve visibility along the supply chain and lead to productivity improvements and better business performance.
Thank you very much. And over to you, Ogechi.
Yes. I think every company, every country, you must know what exactly works for you. And in this digital economy, there are fundamentals that still be the same. You must understand how the customer's journey is changing. This is very important. You must understand the empowered customer. You must understand insight. You must have insight towards what is going to change now, what's going to change in the future. And everything you're doing, you must tailor your offerings to the needs of the customer. So across different countries, what is truly important? What do the customers want, basically? What do they buy? How do they buy? When do they buy? And what do they buy? And where do they buy? Now in 2020 and beyond that, in 10 years' time.
Thank you very much.
And
final comment, if I can ask, from Nubi.
Yes, thanks, Mark. I'm going to focus on business schools. If you look at business schools, whether it's in the UK or whether it's in Nigeria or somewhere else in the world, I don't see much difference. I think we're all in the same boat in terms of, we're struggling to, face the digital economy or digital landscape. Business schools are kind of slow in adopting new technologies, especially digital technologies, and looking for new channels for delivery. For example, most institutions are moving online. They're offering MOOCs, offering SNOOCs or SOCs. It seems like companies like Coursera, Future Learn, Udacity, have kind of taken the initiative away from, business schools. And I think we need to do catch up, when it comes to this. And like I said, it seems that all business schools, worldwide are facing the same challenge in the sense that they have a model, and they are very slow in terms of moving towards change. Change in this sense, meaning digital technology. So we need to move fast, and also we need to innovate, to catch up with the digital economy.
Thank you very much. And this brings us towards the end of our webinar today, and that I think I just have time to tell you something about the poll results. We asked you what your own organizations were struggling with, and number one there at 31% was keeping pace with technological change. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the second highest, nearly 26%, was developing people, followed by making sense of data, understanding your customers, and issues in your supply chain. So that's all from us. Brings us to the end. As I mentioned earlier, it's all recorded. We'll be sending you an email with a link to listen again and to share with colleagues. So thank you very much for joining us today. We've had a great time. We hope you found it interesting and informative. Goodbye.